So to discuss the legality of the framework, the setting up of those panels, and all the objective they set up to achieve, we've got two gentlemen joining us today. Mr. Bondo Bani is a former second vice president of the NBA. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Yeah, thank you, my brother.
And we also do have Mr. Victor Gewa, who is a legal practitioner joining us in my studios in Abuja. Well, let's start with you here. Well, much as many look forward to ensuring that all of these ills are addressed above all else. But then nobody would like to see putting something on nothing, as you say in law. But having seen the way this is going, how it was set up, some concerns that people have asking, wait a minute, having set up this now, are they actually sure that the panels in states can take certain steps that the federal government are supposed to be looking into? What do you think of that?
Thank you for having me. I want us to know that these particular panels all over the Federation was as a result of a resolution of the National Economic Council, in which almost all the governors, I think all the governors are members of that council, so they passed a resolution after the incident, the protest. Go back to your various states. There are complaints. We may not want to do it in a centralized form. This is a federal structure now in, working. Go and take all those complaints because they know the enormity of the complaints.
Federal structure, the NEC meeting.
Yeah, they took that decision at NEC meeting, and they now, instructed all the governors to go to their various states of the Federation in order to set up these panels that will now hear those complaints that people have against the issue of brutalization of the Nigerian police force. And so when you do that, and I think that most of the report also will get back to the federal government, but those ones that can be implemented by the state, the governors will do it. It can be like a judgment of the court. If the governor accepts the panel recommendation, he will forward it to the registrar of the court, who will register that particular acceptance, as judgment of the court, which becomes enforceable. So those ones the state can enforce, they go ahead and do it. The one they cannot, of course, the recommendation will be made to the federal government. That, I think, is what is clearly at play in this regard.
If it was a federal function at that time, the NEC, and it's supposed to be federal responsibility, and they're talking about a federal agency being SARS, so can states come up with those resolutions on behalf of the federal government to execute?
As I said earlier, it is actually federal structure that is working. I don't think anyone can go to court in order to challenge what is actually being played out. There are so many complaints against the Nigerian police, and we know that the states have been doing a lot in terms of even funding the Nigerian police force, in terms of buying vehicles and even kits and boots and materials. They've been doing that. Yeah, so in the regard of what has happened, the federal government realized the enormity of these complaints all over the Federation, and that the best way they can tackle it is not to over-centralize these panels, but let's have them by the various states. Let them get to know the complaint that people are putting up that led to these young men coming to the street and staying for almost 3 weeks.
We'll still come to that and take experiences of people about what happened and how to move forward. But let's equally get the opening comments of Mr. Victor Gewa on this matter. What do you think of the procedure?
Well, thank you, Shimbalin. Good morning. Good morning to my senior colleagues there, Mr. Bani Monday. First of all, I want to say that the idea of setting up of the judicial panel of inquiry by the various states is a palliative measure, what I would call the normal palliatives that the government have given to us, which we have seen that some of them are now in warehouses that have now been looted. With due respect to what my colleague said, the Tribunal of Inquiry cannot, with due respect, look at those subject matter as were enumerated by the governor and the Attorney General of Lagos State. And to be very candid with you, the various Tribunal of Inquiry set up by the various governors of the state is very, 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 incompetent to look at the subject matter. The subject matter. And what is the subject matter? The subject matter, like Mr. Monde said, is police brutality. Police brutality is not an offense per se. There is no offense called police brutality. It is simple human rights violation. Simple human rights violation. And the Tribunal of Inquiry laws of various states, if you look at that of Lagos State, for example, section 1 of that, of the laws, of the Tribunal of Inquiry laws of Lagos State says that this tribunal shall have power to inquire into the actions of public officers of the state. Public officers of the state, public officers of the local government councils, area councils, and even the obas, the traditional councils. So police brutality is an act committed by the Nigerian police force. The Nigerian police force is created under section 214 of the Constitution, and in the second schedule, part 1 of the exclusive legislative list, the Nigerian police force and other security agencies are contained in item 45 of the exclusive legislative list. So the state Tribunal of Inquiry, which is set up by the laws of the state, cannot competently look at the action of a federal agency. Because in the first place, the police is a product of a federal law. So, the only thing the inquiry can do, and the Attorney General of the state was very smart when he was introducing some item, and he said the actions that took place on the 20th of October 2010 in Lekki. So that, if you want to look at what happened, maybe who brought in Fashola's camcorder, you can start looking at, the Tribunal of Inquiry can start asking questions of how come the Fashola's camcorder that was seen at the Lekki toll gate got there. But it cannot look at the issue of police brutality, and as a matter of fact, it cannot even competently look at the actions of those persons, the protesters at Lekki, because the law is that they should investigate and inquire into actions of public officer of a state. So all the Tribunal of Inquiry of the state are not competent to look at police brutality because the Nigerian police force is in the exclusive legislative list of the Constitution, and the National Executive Council, as referenced to by Mr. Monde, my colleagues there, cannot give consent to an illegality. It is a constitutional matter. You cannot give jurisdiction by consent. He knows what I'm saying. So that it was done by a resolution from the Federal Executive Council or the National Economic Council. I mean, we are talking about National Economic Council. That alone itself cannot even pass a resolution to look at the brutality as complained by the NSAS.
Okay.
So we don't want. It is not a competent body to look at police brutality. And
all right, let's...
There is no gainsaying about that. So,
okay, we'll bring it back to you.
Mr. Monde himself knows that.
Okay, let's bring it back to him. So, well, what do you think of it?
Yes, I've listened to him carefully. What is the argument? As I said earlier, what happened in Nigeria was clearly unprecedented, where the Nigerian youth trooped to the streets and they were complaining of police brutality and the issue of extrajudicial killing. The government responded by changing the name of SARS, and the people were still unsatisfied. And the protest continued. Government now said, what do? We need to respond also to the demands of these ones, the young ones. And they've been talking about brutalization of the Nigerian police force, over time, and which has been ignored.
Which is a human rights violation.
Which is a human rights violation. So what do? Now, the federal government, as I said earlier, it was at the Economic Council that decision was taken, that the governors were also participants. I want a situation where we decentralize the issue of getting these complaints. because over-centralization is what some of us have been complaining about. We should operate a proper federal structure in which we can get things domiciled in various federating units. Now, this complaint, if you centralize it, we may not be able, probably in 2 or 3 years' time, we may not be able to get all the, complainants, being here.
Yeah.
Now, go to your various, let me finish now, my brother Chamberlain. Go to your various states. Get to hear this complaint through your tribunals of inquiry, which you are going to set up in accordance with your extant laws. Then, the ones you can implement them. If you are talking about Nigerian police force, there will be recommendation as to prosecution or compensation or whatever. Let it also be reported to the federal government, because this is clearly their exclusive jurisdiction. Issue of police he was talking about. But there are ones that the state can. Of course, in the case of Lagos State Governor, he even put down 200 million naira by way of seed capital in case of compensation. He did it. And there is nothing wrong if at the end of the day, part of the money is given to those who actually have been brutalized and then compensation awarded, which all along has not been. Will any person refuse the money? I'm coming now. Will any person refuse the money and say, oh, no, because it didn't come from the federal government? For God's sake, we are looking at interest of justice now.
That's the question that I want to ask you. Yes. Are you saying that these panels set up by the various state governments are actually federal judicial panels that they set up on behalf of that the governor set up on behalf of the federal government?
No, the issue of subject. The issue of subject is the issue of Nigerian police force. Nigerian police force is something that is clearly exclusive to the federal government. And so it is said that the state cannot have a jurisdiction. But we have, over time, seen where the states have been involved, even in funding Nigerian police force. Yeah, and nobody has come up with the issue, it is something that is exclusive. We see them buy vehicles. I'm coming. We see them buy vehicles.
The legality and authority that the states have over whatever the decisions and recommendations that are made, that I think is the subject matter.
But it's implementation that actually will determine the legality. If after the recommendation by the panel, and then the governors of the various states now send these recommendations to the federal government for implementation. I don't see anything wrong with that, for God's sake.
Okay, but
I'm looking at it from the perspective of over-centralization will create more bottleneck. Can we now decentralize this issue of getting these complaints here by the various states so that we can now recommend to the federal government, who have exclusive jurisdiction over issue of police now, for implementation? I don't see anything fundamentally wrong with that.
We understand that. But the question, that he's put out there, and the questions people want to understand is that, how is it that the states, because clearly, just as he highlighted, under the Tribunal of Inquiry law of states, that of Lagos, Section 1, it clearly stipulates that the issues that they can look at are issues by state public officials. You have equally rightly said that SARS, defunct SARS, it's a federal institution. So how is it then that they don't have the laws, the powers from the law here to look into a federal matter? Then you make a recommendation which you don't have the powers to, and government will implement it. Besides, why can't federal government set up a federal panel to look into these things?
I have given you the locus, from which these particular panels were set up. There was a resolution, I have told you,
that we know,
of a federal, of a federal agency,
under what
National Economic Council, met. In the light of what transpired all over the Federation, there was tension all over the Federation. And now sitting down to set a centralized panel to look into this matter because it's SARS. They said, no, let's decentralize it for the purposes of getting all these complaints here, so that you can now make a recommendation. The ones you can implement, go ahead and implement. But the ones you cannot, because of issue of jurisdiction, bring it to the federal government. I personally, in the light of what has happened and the urgency of the matter, do not see anything. This issue of interest of justice, who is actually now,
but the question about this, much as people
because
want
of
justice,
this issue of legality now, who is actually wounded in this particular regard?
But not that people want justice. So what happens tomorrow if somebody maybe that is accused in this panel comes up and says, well, under the law, you cannot do what you have said you're going to do? There will be lawyers who will take up those cases for those people.
But can I tell you that the panel of inquiry has power to compel any person, including federal government officials, in order to come and give evidence. That panel has a right to regulate
State
these proceedings. Yes.
And including federal SARS for
yes,
federal function?
Yes, the law allows them to do that. They can invite any person before the panel. They can compel you, and even if you disobey, they can also commit you for contempt. So they have a right to invite any person in the country, wherever you are resident, and you must come to the panel, yes, to answer any question or provide any evidence or any documentary evidence in regard to whatever their proceedings are. So they have a right to regulate their proceedings. So there is nothing wrong if they go ahead in order to look into this matter, in order to ensure that they make a recommendation to the federal government. I don't see anything wrong because nobody is wounded. Nobody is wounded in this regard.
Okay. Mr. Giwa, how do we move forward from this? Because listening to what he said, that doesn't correlate to what your initial premise was.
No, thank you. It's not a matter of initial premise. It's a matter of law. And Mr. Monday knows very well that the president and governors cannot sit down and give jurisdiction to issues of law. And it's not about sentiment. Now, we are more particular about the effects of the panel because it has to do with very important matter. And let me talk about solution. Let me talk about, and I'm still wondering why Mr. Monday has not looked at the real issue. The issue of police brutality is very key in the EndSARS protest. Police brutality is a serious violation of the human rights of the Nigerian citizens, the Nigerian young people, Nigerian youth, including old and young. So there is a panel that is created to handle issues of violation of human rights. Mr. Ubani knows very well. I even believe he knows what I'm saying. And that is the National Human Rights Commission. Section 5 and Section 6 of the Act. Section 5 says that the National Human Rights Commission shall have power to look at human rights violation as guaranteed by the Constitution and other conventions, such as the International Convention on the Civil and Political Rights, International Convention on Social and Economic Rights, African Charter on Women's and People's Rights. And Section 6 of that act says that the Commission shall have the power to investigate violation of human rights committed by any persons and any agency, and we have the power to determine compensation and damages for any such violation. Now, there is National Human Rights Headquarters in Abuja. There are various human rights commissions in the various states of the Federation. Just like you have INEC headquarters in Abuja and INEC.
Mr. Giwa, what we're going to do is we'll go to break, but we'll come back to you to continue your train of thought. Stay with us. Welcome back. So, Mr. Giwa, could you go ahead and continue your train of thought?
Okay, so like I was saying, and Chamberlain and Mr. Monday, we also understand that. Can the Lagos State panel of inquiry invite the head of IGP monitoring unit, who takes direct instruction from the IG? Ordinary courts, you will see what is happening in various states. So various states where commissioner of police don't take instructions, from the governors. So not to talk about a panel of inquiry which they know clearly that is not under their jurisdiction. So the truth of the matter is that the only organization, the only body that has the power to look at police brutality, I want us to look at the subject matter. I'm not saying there's illegality in the panel. I'm talking about illegality in the subject of police brutality, which is a violation of the human rights of Nigerians. And I'm saying that it is only the National Human Rights Commission under Section 6 that is expressly stated as amended that has the power to look into human rights violation and determine compensation and damages for victims of human rights violation. And like I said earlier, National Human Rights Commission has offices in at least to the best of my knowledge, in most of these states. And so we should not compromise institutions. We should not undermine institutions. That is why it is set up. And this is the right time for us to see them do their job. But in Nigeria, we don't respect institutions. Things are done at the whims and caprices of people in power. And that is why we are having problems we are having problems with where we are right now, and that is what the NSAS protest is talking about. Where there are institutions that are saddled with the responsibility of meting out, punishment for the deserving officers, those institutions should be empowered to do so. We should not sacrifice it on the altar of convenience. So you cannot say that the panel will look at it and now take some.
Just one moment, Mr. Giwa. The Human Rights Commission has been on since like 1995, so I mean, one can recognize how far back that goes. Now, you also know that the Human Rights Commission was there when Chief Obasanjo, at the beginning of the Fourth Republic, set up the Oputa panel, which, by the way, I mean, if you would also recall that a case went as far as the Supreme Court, where certain dignitaries refused to appear before the panel. The case went all the way to the Supreme Court, and this was the Supreme Court that judged that only states and not the federal government can institute panels such as this. Consequently, the NEC had to go ahead and make that pronouncement that we are seeing today. So the federal government is aware that the NHRC is there. But the Human Rights Commission has also complained about some of these things that are being raised, and nothing has been done. It's not the first time that the Human Rights Commission has taken cases against the Human Rights Commission, human rights cases against the police, against SARS and all of that, and nothing has been done. So what could be wrong with this one, given the ruling of the Supreme Court on the matter?
Okay, thank you very much. It's very simple, Makinde. You have asked a very brilliant point, and the answer is very straightforward. What was in context in that case was the Oputa panel. The competence of the setting up of Oputa panel by the president. And the argument and the decision of the Supreme Court was that, if I'm correct, with reference to the case you mentioned, was that it is only the state government that can competently set up a tribunal of inquiry. It is not within the federal government. Now, what I am saying is that the National Human Rights Commission, right now, even before then, like 1995, 2005, after 2005, the National Human Rights Commission never had the power to enforce its awards. But after a lot of complaints by various stakeholders, they now have the National Human Rights Commission Act as amended. That now makes the decision of the National Human Rights Commission to be as that of an high court. So it has force of law. So the new National Human Rights Commission Act as amended has been empowered by the National Assembly to give it the tools to implement, to have a force of law. So there's a difference between the Oputa panel set up by the then government of President Olusegun Obasanjo than the agency created by law. So the question was that panel couldn't have been set up by the president, except it comes through national legislation. And in terms of Tribunal of Inquiry, it is within the state. Now, what the Tribunal of Inquiry can do, they can inquire into actions, violations that are within the laws of the state. For example, if there is a murder, and the murder is done by what people call them in Lagos, these guys that take care of the traffic in Lagos, LASMA. The Tribunal of Inquiry can look at the murder. It can look at when somebody commits an act of murder, because murder under the criminal code is within the purview of the states. So the Tribunal of Inquiry, as it is constituted, can look at issue of breaking down of buildings in Lagos State, can look at arson done by officers of Lagos State. It can look at destruction of property of Lagos State. He cannot look at the destruction of Central Bank, for example, because Central Bank is an agency of the federal government. So it is not a matter of whether the National Human Rights Commission has been existing. It's the fact that it is only that agency, for now, as provided by the statute. I am not speculating. Section 6, Section 5, and Section 6 are very clear about the competence and the power of the National Human Rights Commission, and it is so clear, and it goes without saying.
All right, Mr. Giwa,
I must say,
we hear you,
that the federal government has empowered the National Human Rights Commission.
Okay, so what we will do is, let's look at sundry issues as well. Just hang on, we'll come back to you. Now, yes, those issues, I mean, we'll have both of you on that subject matter. But then, the acts, the actions, all of those things, those are the things that we want corrected. Yeah. Now, so it's those who, I mean, as lawyers, you go to court based on some of these cases on a regular basis. So in context of some of those particular decisions, whichever case each of you may have gone through, are you confident that at the end of the day, that all of those issues that had happened before and may still be happening will become history moving forward?
Well, looking at sincerity of the government is very key. All the governors have taken up that responsibility of setting these panels, with so much fanfare. And I believe that they must also be very sincere in ensuring that there is full implementation. What drew these young ones into the street was accumulation of grievances over time and without corresponding intent on the part of people they complained to address those issues. It's redress that was not in any way put into context by those in leadership that made this thing to grow over time, that got to a boiling point. So they must be sincere. I have looked at the composition of the panel, in Lagos specifically. There are 4 or 5 members that I know, and these are people of integrity, and I know they will be very sincere enough to make correct recommendation that I feel should be implemented, especially on the issue of violation of people's rights, which over time, nothing has happened. On issue, you saw the young man that came to give evidence, the first witness. He told you that he got judgment against Nigerian police over 5 years. Up to now, there has not been any payment whatsoever. I have a similar. I will also appear before the panel. I got judgment against Nigerian police. There is no appeal up till now. I have done everything humanly possible through the judicial process in order for the Nigerian police to pay the amount of money for my client that was shot when he was coming back from work. A little bit of argument, they shot him. He had to use his money to go to India. After treatment, we came back, and then we now started the case in court. The police never came. We got judgment up to 5 years now. We have not been able to enforce. Central Bank has been hiding the account of Nigerian police. We wrote to the Attorney General of the Federation. They acknowledge up to now they didn't do anything because the Sheriff and Civil Process Act says you must get the consent of the Attorney General before you can execute against any of the agencies of government. So we cannot continue this way. We cannot continue to operate where there is no obedience to court orders or laws. We don't even obey our laws. So this is what I think that this panel will begin to correct. That if I get a judgment against any other Nigerian police or army, it should be enforceable. That is one of the recommendations we expect. And I'm sure they are going to make those recommendations to the federal government. So that's why I said that this argument as to whether they have jurisdiction and all that, let's not engage in television to correctness of this legal jurisprudence. That can be done in court. But I think that the proper thing is that what is the intent? The intent is to ensure that people who have been brutalized, get properly, get proper redress. And if they get proper redress, for God's sake, what is the issue of this? And as I said earlier, the states are the one even funding the police in most of the instances. They're the one buying all the things and all that. So why can't they?
If they are legal, if there are loopholes there, we'll have to.
Well, what I'm saying, it cannot be established on television. Let's go to court. Let's go to court. I have my position, and I know I can be able to canvass it also.
Sorry, before we go to.
No, just a minute. Let him get his own case as well. And we will come back to him on that one. So, Mr. Giwa, so do you see this getting addressed as well? Because, several cases of rights abuses across board. So beyond that of SARS, defunct SARS, I might add, do you see that making an impact moving forward?
Yes, Chamberlain, let me look at let me open a page in this on this matter, and talking about issue of police brutality, like Manu Bani just said, my colleague there. But you see, we need to look at issues with the mindset of solution. We should not apply temporary solutions to permanent problems. And that is why we are where we are right now. I want to bring a very important episode to you and to see what we are talking about in terms of respecting institutions and police brutality. And that takes me to a case of a very young man like I am. One VJ Eldred Opwoma from Bayelsa State. VJ Eldred Opwoma is the gubernatorial candidate in Bayelsa State, and sometimes within this year, he placed his petition in the election tribunal, which was of Bayelsa State Election Tribunal that was holding here in Abuja. And it was on the 15th of August 2020, the tribunal was ready to deliver its judgment. And guess what happened? Talking about institution, why we must respect institution and not promote individualism. This young man was coming with his wife to the tribunal as a petitioner to hear what will be the decision of the tribunal in his own matter. And guess what happened? Members of the Inspector General of Police Monitoring Squad took a swap at him, arrested him on the 15th of August 2020 for an allegation which they claim was made by one Benson Agadaga, who is one politician somewhere in Bayelsa State. They took him from that date, after the matter, embarrassed his wife, that is, harassed him, tortured him, did all kind of things to him within the court premises, and he was arrested on the allegation that somebody has made a petition against him. And what was the petition, Chamberlain? That he recorded somebody's voice. There is no offense as recording somebody's voice. He was taken on the 15th of August. 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days thereafter, the police did not give exactly why he was arrested. Now, the point I'm trying to make here is that it is a holistic thing. It is not the issue of NSAS. So that is why I'm emphasizing on the point of institutions. We should allow the institutions to handle their matters. We should embolden the institution. We should embolden EFCC. We should embolden ICPC. We should embolden the National Human Rights Commission. And let this agency work. The tribunal will come and have a lifespan and go. But when institutions are in place, we will be able to get to a position. Now, when this guy was arrested, and why was he arrested? He was arrested because his petition in the tribunal he was contesting the fact that the current deputy governor of Bayelsa State has issue of certificate forgery, challenging under section 139 subsection E of the Electoral Act, saying that he has been able to make statements contained in affidavit of a fundamental nature that facilitated his credentials to contest the election. And the police, instead of allowing this man to hear what the court was going to say, arrested him, detained him illegally without any warrant of arrest. Even when their lawyer went to court to get a court in order that Justice Taiwo said on that this young man should be produced to court on the 2nd of September, the police refused to obey that order. They did not produce him on the 2nd of September. The judge, Justice Taiwo, made another order that he should be produced on the 7th of September. The police did not bring him to court on the 7th of September. The court had to make a final decision on the 10th of September. That is when it was finally released based on the judgment of the court. What is the point I'm saying? The point I'm saying is that we must be able to allow institutions of the state to perform their functions, and the institution should have the internal mechanism to discipline its own. And when they fail, public outcry, like we have seen and we are going to see, should be made to them, and they should be made to correct their activities. such that we will not be applying temporal measures to permanent solutions.
We hear you on that one.
Right
But
now,
let's also bring it. Let's bring this back to Mr. Ubani as we wrap this up now. One of the issues that a number of people who are aware will be looking at is, of course, we've been talking about the legality, we've been talking about the process, but then there is that Supreme Court ruling that says only states have the right to come up with certain panels of inquiry, such as this one. Now, does that ruling of the Supreme Court, does it undermine or whatever to the commission, the National Human Rights Commission?
I don't think so. The states still have a responsibility, to do things, that happen within their state. What happened, as I said earlier, recently was clearly unprecedented. The governor of Lagos State himself, was the first person, to be fair to him, that came into the fray, joined the youth, he spoke to them. At the same time, ran to the federal government, with the recommendation, with whatever the keys were actually demanding. I said, look, it's what they are, saying, pass it over to the federal government. Came back again, stayed with the young ones even during the protest, showing level of concern because it's about security. If there is any breakdown of law and order in the state, this entire state will be, engulfed in fire. So the man did all he could. Then, which led to this issue of NEC meeting, and that NEC, there was a resolution, go to your various state. Let's listen to the young ones, what they're even complaining about, which is actually what led to this inquiry, panel of inquiry being set all over the country. To me, the most important thing is the intent. What is the intent? Is to really assuage and make sure that recommendations are made and corrections made. We must make permanent correction to what has happened. Over time, we neglect these issues. And I cannot blame the state now for taking these proactive measures they are all taking in order to redress this issue of getting people to talk about what has been penning them over time. He's been penning them, and it's been bottled up. Now it's spilled over. Now people are now trying to redress it, and somebody is now talking about legality and all that. For God's sake, there are times when
for goodness sake, your lawyers. What do lawyers talk about?
What I'm saying, we cannot establish that over a television. That can be done in a court of law.
No, but you can make the points on television.
For me, what is being done is clearly something I applaud, and this is one of the reasons also why you brought me here. Is also remember that I also made a promise that those that broke into the warehouses all over because of hunger, because those things were supposed to be given to them, but the governors erred by holding them, and there was no explanation as to why the reason these things were being held. And these guys now discovered during this process that they needed these things which were never distributed to them in the first place, and took them. Now you arrested them and are now keeping them in detention. Most of them have not been charged. They have not been granted administrative bail. There was a woman that I heard yesterday was going to go and buy things.
To represent them.
I'm going to represent them. I have offered free legal services to those that went to those warehouses to collect those things because they were hungry. Because the governors themselves supposed to be the one to be charged and arraigned for holding those things that were supposed to be.
What about those who stole people's property?
No, those ones cannot, they require legal representation, but not pro bono. Now, because they did something that is fundamentally wrong, we must make a distinction between hunger.
How will you prove that they were hungry?
Of course, when you see a hungry man, You see, this guy.
Well, I cannot establish that on television. I can't establish the legality of the hungry man on TV. Mr. Give us your concluding thoughts as we go
on. Well, I'm very surprised at what my senior colleague is saying. I'm very, very surprised. But I know why he's saying what he's saying. And let us not miss the point. The point I'm making is the fact that, yes, there needs to be an urgent action to address the issues of police brutality. I was part of the NSAS project. We are conversing that those issues should be addressed. But what I am saying is that we should not allow. Even the governors, have the governors not even used, the same governors, have they not used the same agencies of security agency to oppress the people? We have just been told now by the Nigerian army that it was the governor of Lagos State that even invited them to do what they did. So who is going to probe the governor? How are you going to hold the governor accountable? Most of these states, it's happened in Kogi State. We have seen where the state governors also deploy the agency of the police against their people. We are seeing in Port Harcourt today a lot of atrocities done by the police. My point is that those actions must be investigated, but it must be investigated by the proper authority so that there will be no issue as to talk about the implementation of the recommendation made by any of those agencies. That is the point I'm making. I don't want somebody that will any action that will look to be a decoy, that is done just to pacify the youth. We don't want to be pacified. What we want is we want really solution to those injustices, and the government and the federal government knows they have all it takes to address this issue of police brutality. They know when to handle it. In short, we can have even the commissioner of police setting up panels within their states to investigate some of these things. It will be done publicly. People, the National Bar Association will be involved. People will go to their various states when it is set up by the federal agencies, and those issues will be done. We want live coverage of those issues. It is not when you come through one other tribunal that will come up. We will come and be discussing some of these things. So that is why we want institutions to be empowered so that their decision can make can enthrone justice. That is the point we are making. The truth is that all those panels of inquiry should be disbanded. I mean, for the purpose of the police brutality, it is not within their power to look at the police brutality. The relevant agencies should do that. Our youth should not be deceived by those parts. The panel of inquiry can look at what happened in other issues. But on police brutality, we have enough agency to look at it and make sure that compensation is made, make sure that damages are done. Federal government can set up a tax fund, distribute it the way they did to COVID. Yaya Bello said 2 billion was sent to each governors of the state for the purpose of COVID-19. The presidency should also send money to each state for the purpose of compensation of victims. We don't have to wait for Lagos State. The presidency should bring out money. The action of the police is an action of the federal agency. Distribute the money to the various governors. Let the Human Rights Commission and the various agency, civil society organization look at this point, address the issue, and ensure that it is enforced. That is the proper way to go. We don't want anything to deceive us. We want justice, and nobody can tell me that the Tribunal for Inquiry has the power to look at police brutality. That will not be correct. That will amount to a decoy.
I don't think it was 2 billion that the governor said, actually, but we do get your point. So let's get your concluding thoughts as well.
So my take is that life will never be the same again. It's important that government take any complaint at any point in time serious. Let them not allow those things to accumulate, because this is actually what led to what has happened presently. Anytime there is complaint or issue of grievance by citizens, we want these proactive measures, by state and federal. If you address those issues, we begin to have a country that all of us shall be proud of. Then secondly, on this issue of arrest, the mass arrest that is going on, they should apply humanness in dealing with these people. There are most people that are innocent that have been picked now, and they are being kept in detention, no administrative bail, and you have not charged them to court. So it is important we do not go back again to issue of NSAS. There is this level of wickedness in governance that made people to go out to the street. Don't, in the process of mass arrest now, and then intimidate and be doing more things that will make them to be angry and frustrated. Those that are innocent should be allowed to go home. Those that are culpable, charge them to court timelessly. Don't keep them in indefinite detention. It's not the right thing to do.
Okay, Mr. Mondo Bani, former second vice president of the NBA, as well as Mr. Victor Giwa, a legal practitioner. Gentlemen, thank you both for talking to us today.